What's up everyone, Darcblade here, returning with another Mass Effect 3 multiplayer class guide. Today we are going to be taking a look at the last Reckoning DLC character, the Cabal Vanguard. The Cabal Vanguard is a female turian, and she has some very unique properties. She is a character that specialises in poison damage, she has incredible movement speed, and is probably one of the best hit and run characters in the game. Now, like all my characters, I spec the Cabal Vanguard for the harder difficulties in the game. I did have a bit of trouble choosing a decent spec for my character that I felt comfortable with, but I went with the following spec. I went up to rank 4 in Poison Strike. This is the move the Cabal Vanguard gets instead of Biotic Charge. I felt I didn't need to max this out as I wasn't going to be using Poison Strike to dish out the damage. Instead, I use it as an escape mechanism, and that is why I put points into range over damage. If you did want to use Poison Strike as a damage dealing ability, then Poison Strength, Poison Duration and Damage would probably be the ideal spec to go with for Poison Strike. I went up to rank 4 in Nightshade Blades. Now, some people like to max these out, but these take a grenade capacity slot, so I felt it was more convenient to use them as an emergency staggering mechanic rather than a damage dealing ability. If you wanted them to dish out the most damage possible, then Enhanced Blades, Poison Duration and Damage would be the ideal choices for Nightshade Blades. Now, I max out Biotic Focus as I feel this is a great defensive mechanic. I put points into Biotic Shield over Heightened Focus. I feel that Biotic Shield allows you some invincible frames, and it also restores your shield slightly, so it's basically almost like a Vanguard's Biotic Charge shield restore, but you don't actually have to put yourself in harm's way. You can actually do it stationary rather than charging into targets. I put points into melee damage bonus over duration. Both of these choices are viable, and if you're not going for the melee build, then duration would probably be the better idea. But for me, as this is going to be a melee focused build, I went for melee damage bonus. Lastly, I put points into damage taken over movement speed bonus because I feel that the Cabal Vanguard already moves fast enough. As for the passive abilities, with Turian Veteran, I put points into increasing all possible damage output from my weaponry. This build is a weapon reliant build, so you need to have your weapons doing as much damage as they possibly can. As for Venom Gauntlets, I put points into melee synergy over Fitness Expert. Now, I don't normally do this because I always like Fitness Expert, but thanks to the Cabal Vanguard's ability to move around the battlefield easily, it means you're able to take out weaker enemies with a heavy melee in order to get that damage buff, so you can take on the harder opponents with your weaponry. I put points into Martial Artist over Sealed Regeneration, and lastly I put points into melee damage over durability. If you were not comfortable with having a melee build, you could swap the melee damage and melee synergy for durability and Fitness Expert in order to give the Cabal Vanguard more health and shields. As for weaponry and gear slots, these are down to personal preference, I feel. With the weaponry, I feel a good submachine gun or pistol works really well with the Cabal Vanguard. Alternatively, you could use a shotgun as you're able to get up close and personal with opponents before using Poison Strike to make your escape. As for gear, I like to use the Geth Scanner because as you're going to be teleporting through walls thanks to Poison Strike and the dodge mechanics of the Cabal Vanguard, you'll want to know what is behind that wall when you teleport through it. Anyway, let's get into the heart of the episode and talk about the Cabal Vanguard's moves and abilities. Its first ability, and a unique ability only available to the Cabal Vanguard, is Poison Strike. This replaces Biotic Charge, which normal Vanguards would have. Now, Poison Strike, basically the Cabal Vanguard will slash through enemy lines. Basically, it's a Biotic Charge that allows you to pass straight through enemies. This can also apply to any obstacle really. You can use Poison Strike to basically go through walls and obstacles. When you pass through an enemy with Poison Strike, you will deal instant biotic damage. On top of this, you will also put a poison effect on the enemy, dealing damage over time. This works great on harder enemies, bosses for example, as you're able to pass through them, dealing damage, and then make your escape. Potentially on bosses you could keep doing this, passing through them, dealing damage until the bug bites of the poison and the initial biotic damage finally kills them. Now, when you use Poison Strike, you are invincible as you travel, but you don't get any shields back, you don't get any barriers back from using Poison Strike. This is another key difference between Poison Strike and Biotic Strike that the normal Vanguards have. Now, for the Cabal Vanguard, I feel that Poison Strike is best used as an escape mechanic, something that allows you to get away from enemies quickly and get you to safety. I feel that using weaponry and the Nightshade Blades are a better alternative to dealing damage rather than using Poison Strike. And that brings me on to the second move and ability available to the Cabal Vanguard, which is Nightshade Blades, another unique move only available to this class. With Nightshade Blades, the Cabal Vanguard will launch a short-range volley of venom-tipped blades to paralyze non-shielded targets. These blades will initially cause damage, but on top of that they will add a poison effect to the target, dealing damage over time. Nightshade Blades deal a fair amount of damage, which is good. They also have a staggering effect. Enemies hit with them will stagger back, giving the Cabal Vanguard a brief respite from taking damage. Now, Nightshade Blades are in limited supply. They count as grenades. Thus, having a grenade capacity mod really helps with using Nightshade Blades if you're so inclined. However, I still feel that with the Cabal Vanguard that the Geth Scanner is probably the best gear slot available for this class. Anyway, once your Nightshade Blade count is depleted, simply go to an ammo box like you would any other grenade type of ability and replenish it. Now, Nightshade Blades have a paralyzing effect. This means that anyone who has a red health bar, you know, their shields have gone, barriers gone, whatever, just the red health bar left, will be stunned. Basically, they won't be able to move. This is a great effect, especially if you're being overrun by lots of little enemies. Seeing as Nightshade Blades does have quite a wide arc, it means you can affect multiple opponents with this paralyzing effect in order to make your escape. Now, you can tell someone is affected by the poison of Nightshade Blades, and in fact Poison Strike as well, because they will turn green. It looks quite funny when you see a green brute or something walking around. One option with Nightshade Blades though with this spec is if you felt confident enough with your maneuverability to warrant dropping Poison Strike altogether, which is viable, then you can simply put the points and max out Nightshade Blades. Nightshade Blades does do a fair amount of damage, especially when it's maxed out, so it's an option, especially if you feel you don't need the maneuverability that Poison Strike gives you. But in rank 6, Enhanced Blades or Exploding Blades, depends how you want to take on things. If you want to take on bosses, then Enhanced Blades is probably better, but if you're taking on weaker opponents, then Exploding Blades. On a last note, Exploding Blades does not end the damage over time poison effect that Nightshade Blades will put on targets. Now, the third and final ability available to the Cabal Vanguard is Biotic Focus. This is a wonderful defensive mechanism. Basically, the Cabal Vanguard will focus her biotic energy to decrease damage taken, but also to increase melee damage, as well as movement speed for a short time. So basically, this buff gives you 3 positive effects. Damage taken decreased, melee damage increased, movement speed increased. You'll tell that Biotic Focus is activated because there'll be blue outlines around your loadout. Now, depending how you spec Biotic Focus, there are different effects. I mean, it's an all-round great defensive mechanic that can be advanced by heightened focus, but if you put points into Biotic Shield, then it gives you the potential to give you a life-saving mechanic, as you'll be invulnerable for 0.50 seconds. I know it's not a lot, but that could save your life sometimes. On top of that, you will also regenerate 40% of your barriers, which helps a lot when you think about it, because it's like an instant heal. Now, with the build I'm using, you can pretty much spam Biotic Focus all the time, unless you're trying to get away from some enemies, in which case you'll be using Poison Strike, which uses up your power cooldown, of course. So for the most part though, you want to spam and have Biotic Focus on as often as you possibly can. A side note for Biotic Focus is that it doesn't have any animation when you activate it, therefore the Cabal Vanguard can pretty much turn it on whilst she's doing other things. One way to look at Biotic Focus is it's like the stimulant packs that the Turian Ghost and Turian Havoc have, but instead of it being normal damage, it's melee damage, and instead of it consuming a grenade, it's an actual ability, and thus relies on a power cooldown timer. As for the passive abilities, I normally say these are down to personal preference, but with this build, with the Cabal Vanguard, I put all points in Turian Veteran into increasing weapon damage. Weapon damage will be your main source of damage with this character, because Turian Veteran gives nice weapon damage buffs. It's the highest in the game. Now, the alternative would be to go for power damage, but this is only if you really want to use your Nightshade Blades or Poison Strike as your main source of damage output. As for Venom Gauntlets, like I said at the start of the video, I've gone for a melee build. The thinking behind this is that you use heavy melee attacks to kill weaker opponents, and then you use the buff you get from this, thanks to melee synergy, to take on the larger opponents with your weaponry. Now I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here and talk about the Cabal Vanguard's racial abilities, because its melee is quite unique and directly affects the Venom Gauntlets in a way, because basically the Gauntlets will allow 30% of your melee damage to be applied as poison damage over 5 seconds. This means that you can heavy melee someone, poison strike to get away, and they will still die from the heavy melee in order to give you the melee synergy buff for your weapons. To top it off as well, the Cabal Vanguard's heavy melee is very unique. It's almost like the Shadow Strike available to the N7 Shadow. It has a much shorter range though, but basically when you target an opponent, the Cabal Vanguard will teleport behind the opponent and slash them with both her Venom Gauntlets. This is a really useful move, and it really helps you do hit and run tactics with this character. Her light melee is a simple combo of slashes that will constantly deal damage because there is no end to the combo. As for her other racial abilities, she has a fairly high health and barrier pool. This can be, of course, augmented if you prefer not to use a melee build, but because the melee build is quite unique and quite fun, I feel why not take advantage of it. She has good dodge mechanics too, which are similar to the N7 Fury and Slayer. The dodge allows her to teleport short distances, but this costs a little bit of a barrier each time. But on the plus side though, this is an awesome dodge mechanic that allows you to easily dodge projectiles, as well as teleport you through walls and obstacles. As for weaponry, now like I said at the start of the video, I went with a submachine gun. You can mix and match a little bit with the Cabal Vanguard, as she is very good with weaponry and you'll want to be using your best weapons, but you still want to have a fairly light loadout. You don't want to have a cooldown timer that's too long. If you have a long cooldown timer, then you're not going to get the most out of Biotic Focus or Poison Strike. You really want to be able to spam Biotic Focus, as this helps make up for the fact that you haven't put points into increasing her health and shields in Venom Gauntlets. Now the Cabal Vanguard has various builds as well. This is just the one that worked best for me. You can change it so it doesn't have Poison Strike, for example, and max out Nightshade Blades. There are builds where you don't necessarily go for Biotic Focus, but for the whole, I feel that this one worked the best for me. I hope it works well for you too. Overall, the Cabal Vanguard was hard to get used to, but once you get used to it, it's actually quite a good character. She's got the potential to take a lot of damage, and she has the potential to dish out a lot of weaponry damage. If you use her abilities like I do, and instead of using them for direct damage, instead use them to aid and support the Cabal Vanguard, then hopefully you will start enjoying the class. Anyway, I've been Darcblade, bringing my guide to the Cabal Vanguard on Mass Effect 3's multiplayer. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.